Hit it, Phil.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Can it be the breeze that fills the trees with rare and magic perfume? Oh, no, it isn't the breeze, it's Jackson time. La-da-da-da.
Stay tuned.
Right after this episode.
For our discussion.
The Jack Benny Program with his special guest stars, Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Colman. Presented by Lucky Strike.
Mr. Benny takes a bath in this stuff every day, and he still don't look any younger. Well, I guess I better get his breakfast ready. Oh, good morning, boys.
Good morning.
I didn't know you were up yet. I was just getting ready to bring your breakfast up to your room.
Never mind, I'll eat right down here.
Okay. How'd you sleep last night?
How'd I sleep? I wish I knew. I'm gonna stop getting undressed in the dark.
Why?
I don't know whether I tossed and turned all night or I put my pajamas on backwards.
Go back to sleeping in nightgowns.
No. They always creep up on me. And when I wake up in the morning, I look like I'm wearing an old life preserver. What do you got all those books out for?
Oh, I had to take them off the shelf so I could clean them.
Oh, good. Rochester, how long did you boil this egg?
A minute and a half.
Minute and a half, is that all?
Yeah, when you told me you got them from a fire sale, I figured that's all they needed.
What's this?
Smoked ham, same sale.
What are you laughing at?
This bread was ridiculous. I had to scrape it before I put it in the toaster.
Well, they were all such bargains, I just couldn't turn them down.
Say, boss, if you tell me what time you'll be home from work this afternoon, I'll have your milk bath all ready for you.
No. After yesterday, I'm not going to take those baths anymore.
Well, I thought you enjoyed bathing in milk. What happened?
I splashed around so much, the milk turned to butter, and I could hardly get out of the tub. Rochester, from now on, let's go back to the plain, ordinary lavender bubble bath. Oh, my goodness, look what time it is. Rochester, I won't be able to finish my breakfast. I'll grab a bite to eat at the studio. Look, if my director calls, tell him I'm on my way, will you?
Yes, sir. I better get these books put back. Let's see, this stack goes up here. You Can't Take It With You by Colemans and Hart. You Can't Take It With You by Colemans and Hart. You Can't Take It With You by Colemans and Hart. I'll Find a Way by Jack Benny. He Probably Will by Colman and Hart. What's this? One of Mr. Benny's diaries. 1945. 1945. Yeah, one little peek won't hurt anybody. This page looks like it might be interesting. August 15th, 1945.
Dear Diary, tonight, my next-door neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Colman, invited me to have dinner at their home. Ronnie and Bonita were so thrilled that I accepted their invitation.
Mr. and Miss Ronald Colman invited Mr. Benny to dinner? See, that's funny. I don't... Oh, yeah, now I remember. That's the day that Mr. and Mrs. Don Wilson and Miss Livingston were over here playing bridge. Mr. Benny,
Yeah?
don't forget you got a dinner appointment at 8 o'clock.
Yes, I know. I'll see.
A dinner appointment? Where are you going?
Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Colman invited me to dinner tonight. They live next door, you know. Now,
You invited to the Colemans?
well, what's so strange about that? We've been neighbors for a long, long time. Of course, for a while there, my success in pictures came between us, you know. I don't want to be late because they went through all that bother of sending me an invitation and everything. I don't want to keep them waiting.
Jack, you mean they sent you an invitation and they live right next door?
Well, that would be the dignified thing to do.
Jack, could I see that invitation you got from the Colemans?
Well, of course you can see it. Please. I wish Rochester wouldn't be so careless with my mail, too. I found that out on the back porch.
Dear Jack, glad to know you are back in America. Benita and I would love to have you for cocktails and dinner Sunday evening. We'll expect you around 8. Regards, Ronnie.
You satisfied?
Jack, what does he mean, back in America?
Well, for my trip. My trip last summer to Europe.
I still don't understand it.
What's there to understand? Look, I've been invited to some of the best homes in Beverly Hills. Well, I have.
No, Jack. Why, I just read in one of the columns that last week you were a guest at Gary Cooper's birthday party. Some guest. He was waiting on tables.
I just did that for a gag.
Gag, eh? Why did the people put tips under their plates?
Gag, too.
Then why'd you pick up the tips?
Because I can go along with a gag, sister. You should have heard I got screams. Every time I picked up a tip, they yelled.
Boss, you better hurry up. It's getting late.
The Colemans always dress for dinner, so lay out my white tie and tails.
Yes, sir.
Now, let's finish the game.
Okay.
I want to...
Boss, you better get going this day.
I think I'll be 5 minutes late. No, it'll make an impression on the Colemans. They're almost as nervous as I am.
Oh, Ronnie!
Yes, Benita, what is it?
Hey, don't you think it's time you put those stamps away and got dressed for dinner? You know, we have a guest for dinner tonight.
A guest tonight? Who?
Well, Jack, of course. Jack Wellington from London.
Yes, I forgot. Good old Wellington. Well, I'm glad you remembered to mail him the letter I wrote.
Well, I didn't, as a matter of fact. I couldn't find it anywhere. I think it must have blown out of the window or something. Anyhow, I phoned him instead.
Splendid, splendid.
So, don't you think you ought to get dressed?
Dressed? Oh, my dear, not for Wellington. These clothes are good enough for him. Besides, he hates anything formal.
I don't think change either then. But I do think this occasion calls for some champagne. Why don't you get some out, darling? Then we can use that lovely silver bucket Wellington gave us when we first got married. I'll go and get it. He'll be thrilled to see it again.
Yes, so will I.
What?
The comedian who lives next door borrowed it. Now, Benita, it's no use getting upset. It seems he was giving a party for his sponsor and wanted to impress him.
Jack Benny serving champagne? I don't believe it.
You will if he's thoughtful enough to return our empty bottle.
You mean that he also...
And 3 trays of ice cubes.
Now, Ron, how can you encourage him like that?
Encourage him? My dear girl, I wasn't even here. He came in through the window, helped himself, and left a note.
We'll just have to use the other ice bucket, I suppose. I only hope things will be quiet over there while Wellington's here.
Why? Have they been noisy again?
Oh, my dear, this morning it was terrible. Mr. Benny was shouting at that valet of his. What's his name again? You know, it's the same as a city in England.
Liverpool?
No.
Southampton?
Manchester.
Manchester.
Manchester. Well, Mr. Benny was shouting at Manchester about his coffee was too weak, and Manchester was shouting back to say that he'd been telling him for years you're not supposed to use the coffee grounds more than once.
Yes, I've heard some of those sessions. But you know, they're mild when you compare them with that Frank Remley fellow. I remember years ago when he rang our front doorbell on the stroke of midnight to wish me a Happy New Year.
Well, I think that was rather nice.
On August the 5th?
Oh, that was a little odd.
Tell me, darling, does this Remley person have something to do with the Benny program?
Yes, I understand he's in the orchestra.
Oh, he's a musician.
No, he's just in the orchestra.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Coleman.
Oh, yes, Sherwood.
Mr. Jack Wellington has arrived.
Oh, good.
Fine.
Good.
Just check on the dinner, will you,
Yes,
please, Sherwood? Ah, there he is.
Wellington, old boy. How are you?
Oh, I'm so glad to see you, Jack.
Good to see you too, dear.
Let me take your coat.
Oh, thank you. You know, I came straight from the club, so I hope you don't mind my being dressed like this.
Oh, of course not.
Much cozier as we are.
By the way, Ronnie, I was always under the impression that the part of Beverly Hills that you two live in was exclusively a residential area. And yet, right next door to you, I notice there's quite a busy used car dealer.
Oh, no, that's Jack Benny's house. He tore up the front lawn and put in a parking lot.
You mean the fellow on the wireless?
Yes. Why, just the other night we tuned in on his program quite by accident, and it was the most...
Now, let's not talk about that before dinner. Come on, Wellington, come into the library and have a drink.
Good.
I want to hear all your news. How you found things on the continent, all about your Indian trip. Tell me now, how are things in the elephant set?
I had my usual bad luck in Pune, but that's rather a long story.
Well, we had the whole evening together, so let's have a cocktail first, shall we?
I should say so.
Benita. This is one of the glasses I sent you from Rangoon.
Dear, they're my most treasured possession.
You know, no one will believe us when I tell them that there are only 11 of those glasses in the entire world.
Well, it's absolutely true. The King of Siam has 5, and you have 6.
Oh.
Now, let me see if I can remember that recipe you brought back from Malaya.
There's a gentleman at the door, sir. Here's his card.
Card? Jack Benny.
Here. Oh, maybe he's come to return the ice bucket.
Well, Sherwood, tell Mr. Benny... Oh, tell him I'll call him tomorrow.
Yes, explain that we have a guest for dinner, and that'll take care of it.
Mrs. Coleman, he said you were expecting him for dinner.
Dinner? Benita, did you invite Jack Benny for dinner?
Well, no. Are you sure you didn't?
I'm positive. Show him in and set another place for dinner.
Yes, sir.
Now, let's get back to your recipe, Wellington. I think after a few drops.
Mr. and Mrs. Coleman are in the library. May I have your hat, sir?
Oh, yes. Oh, just a moment. Ronnie! So good to see you.
Well, it's good to see you, Jack.
Benita!
Oh, to see you. I mean, it's nice. It's nice.
What?
Well, I wanted to meet an old friend of ours. Mr. Jack Wellington, this is Mr. Benny.
I'm glad to meet you, Mr. Benny.
Well, I didn't expect anyone else here for dinner, but then that's just like the Colemans. Always room for one more. Yes, sir.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, sir.
Now, Jack, can I give you a cocktail?
No, thank you. I'll just sit here and read a magazine while you three go and get dressed.
No, my dear fellow. This is quite informal.
Informal? Ronnie, I can't tell you how happy I am to hear you say that. My shoes are killing me. Feels good.
Ronnie, I think I could use a cocktail.
Mr. Wellington, you're from England, aren't you?
Why, yes, as a matter of fact, I am.
And you were just about to tell us, how are things over there?
Oh, it's very exciting. The tourist season is in full swing, and Lance Olivier has just made a smashing success with his new film, Henry V.
Good. Well, I only hope I can get over there next year. I like to be there in the spring.
Oh, so do I. Everything looks so lovely in the spring. Do you remember the river at Pangbourne? Thank you, darling.
Ah, the Thames.
Yes, the jolly old Thames.
Yes.
You know, I always take them when my stomach is upset. Thames.
Have you read any good books lately?
Why, yes, dear. At your suggestion, I reread The Decline and Fall, and believe it or not, I found it even more absorbing the second time.
Well, I think that's often the way. I've just reread Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy, and it's very amusing.
Well, it's not funny enough for me. I like something more full-blooded. Now you take the old Greek tragedies. The torments of Oedipus, the vengeance of Electra, the agonies of Medea.
Have any of you noticed the frightful mess that little orphan Annie's been in lately? Yes, sir. Yep.
I think we have to
Yes, sir.
Yep.
You said it.
Dinner is served.
Thank you, Sherwood.
Shall we go into the dining room?
Come on, Jack.
Oh,
It's
I'm
such
hungry,
a long
too.
time since you've had dinner with us, Jack.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Benny.
Certainly was.
You want some more coffee?
No, thank you, dear. You know, that dinner was absolutely wonderful.
Well, I'm very glad you enjoyed it.
I have an idea. I shall go and find that bottle of old brandy.
Oh, good. I'll come and get the glasses. Help yourself to coffee, Mr. Benny.
Oh,
I believe I will have some.
Let me do it for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. You know, Wellington, I thought it was awfully decent of you to say that you enjoyed the dinner tonight. But I did. Well, it was all right, but it seems to me that they could have had bigger chickens. That was squab.
Well, here we are.
Benita, where in the world is that bottle of brandy?
Oh, let me see.
It's on the lower shelf on the left. I remember it was right next to your ice bucket.
Oh, yes, here it is.
Benita, I was just telling Wellington here how much I enjoyed your squab. Good.
There we are. Wellington, before you leave town, you ought to come down to the club and I'll play you a game of tennis.
I'm afraid there's a tournament going on there right now, but we can go over to Bel Air.
Here you are.
Thank you, dear.
Mr. Benny.
Thank you.
Now, Ronnie, come on, let's have a toast.
Yes, a toast.
How did that speech go in Henry V?
Well, you mean once more onto the breach?
That's it.
And you, good yeoman, show us here the mettle of your posture.
I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, training upon the start. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit. And upon this charge cry, God for Harry, England and St. George!
St. George!
Hooray!
That's what they did in the picture.
Well, that makes us even with the King of Siam.
Say, how about a game of charades and liven things up?
Oh, I don't think so, Jack. It's getting a little late.
Oh, my goodness, I had no idea how late it was.
It is getting rather late.
Late? It's only 9:30. Yes, sir. Yep. Time marches on.
Yes, sir.
Yup.
Well, I guess I'd better be running along.
Oh, what a pity.
I'll get your coat.
Well, goodbye, Mr. Wellington. It was a pleasure.
Goodbye, Mr. Benny, and with my luck, we'll probably meet again.
Yes, thank you. Benita had such a wonderful time.
Well, we were happy you came.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Your hat.
You? Oh, my gloves.
They're in your hat.
Oh, yes. Ronnie, I had a wonderful evening, and I'm terribly sorry about Wellington.
Wellington? What do you mean?
Well, I know how loyal you are to your friends, but I think it's awful the way one man can put a damper on a whole party.
You know, Jack, there's a lot of truth in what you say.
Goodbye, Benita.
Good night.
Good night, Ronnie.
Good night, Jack.
I'm not out yet.
Oh, pardon me.
Well, goodbye, Ronnie.
Goodbye, Jack.
Goodbye. Good night. Can it be the breeze that fills... Good night, diary. Hello?
Jack? I just called to ask Rochester if I left my gloves there this afternoon. Didn't you go to the Colemans?
Well, of course I did.
Oh, what are you doing home so early?
Well, I thought it was the nice thing to do. You know, they were so tired.
Tired at 9:30?
9:30. They started yawning 10 minutes after I got there.
I'll bet you're in bed, too.
Of course I am. But I'm not going right to sleep. I'm going to read a while.
What are you going to read?
Oh, I don't know. I might read Decline and Fall, or Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. I understand it's quite amusing.
Jack, did you have a sip of brandy?
Brandy? Yes.
I thought so. Good night.
Good night.
Well, hello again. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and we're going to chat about it. This is the only time the Colemans are actually on the Jack Benny Show, and I have my friend John Henderson to talk about it with me.
Hello.
And he runs the podcast This Day in Jack Benny.
Yeah.
And I assume we're both darn close to starting a new season here in probably still a month away, right?
Yeah, I think October is the next one that I've got.
Yeah.
I think there's a few episodes of Jack Benny that are earlier, but I've already done those. So,
okay.
Yeah, I think October is the time.
And what I've started doing, and I don't know if you do this regularly on your podcast or not, we're giving you a little insight into our podcast now, but I've started to grab the episodes that were done in the summer, like where he's guest starring on someone's show. Like he did, I just did one from 1944 where their summer replacement was the music. It's a musical show, your all-time greatest musical hits or all-time hit parade or something like that. Anyway, I love that one because Jack and Rochester and Mary all appear and they take over the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes of it's more than 5. It's got to be 6, 7 minutes of the show. And there's no show. I mean, it goes right into Jack having a conversation with Rochester. And it's this whole, oh, I know we're off for the summer, but our replacement show is this. And I think it's going to be a good replacement show, blah, blah, blah. And then they start doing a bit and talking back and forth. And it's decent. And then Mary joins in, which is great. And then it goes into the show. And I think they acknowledge that Jack was introducing it or something, but he's not on the show. It's separate.
Oh, interesting. And
then they go through the show and they get about 2/3, no more than 2/3. They get almost done with the show. And Jack and Mary and Rochester come back on and do another bit for 5 minutes and to kind of end the show more or less. And then they come back and start trying to do the credits and things. But it's so interesting because during the credits, you can hear the show starts to go, and you start not hearing what the announcer's saying. And so I'm going, okay, that's the transcription disc or something. So I'm glad it gave out at this point, not earlier.
Yeah.
But it's not that, because an announcer comes on and goes, oh, we're having trouble with the feed. So we're going to be switching you to so-and-so playing you piano music. And and then a piano player comes on and starts playing. And I don't know if that's taped or if they have someone in studio just in case something like this happens and it's just some dude that goes and sits at the piano and starts playing music.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what happens there. And that goes on for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And then they're like, oh, we've got the feedback. And so then it goes back to the show for the very end of the credit thing or whatever. And so it's just a interesting show overall for a lot of the things, for the fact that the cast is on it, for the, all of that. Anyway, and I shared it because we're doing this. This will go out tomorrow because we're this is why. And some people are going, why haven't we had a show for 2 weeks? Well, it's because this is the one that was supposed to go. I misplaced our intro for it that we recorded quite a while ago. And so we decided to do a new intro. And so this is going to be very timely. It's August of 2024. No, it's now. Is it September yet, or is it?
I think it's still August, but it's almost September.
It's August. It's the last day of August.
Yeah.
So we're recording this the last day of August, 2024. This is going to go out tomorrow on, I guess, the first day of September, 2024. And just last Sunday on my podcast, and I never plugged my podcast on this, so I'm going to plug my podcast. So It's Jack Benny OTR, the Jack Benny Show OTR podcast, and we run Jack Benny shows a couple times a week. We're what we do usually when the season hits is we run 2 Jack Benny shows that are 10 years apart. So we'll like run the 39 and the 49 episode. And then in between them, we'll have sandwiched in the Phil Harris show that's from that same week. And so they're all always from the same week sort of thing. So anyway, since I don't have shows over the summer to show, because of course he wasn't doing a show then, he was taking his break, we show things like that episode. And I don't think I've ever shared it before, so have a listen to that. It's a fun episode to listen to. But now let's go to John and his show for just a second. So what have you been airing like during the summer? Just a kind of a best of Benny or something?
Well, I think this summer I've done different things, different summers. Yep. This summer, I have done these guest shots and bonus episodes.
Okay.
To fill in. So, one of them actually was a summer replacement show, which was an interesting variety show. It was kind of earlier-ish, 40s, and it starred Irene Ryan, who went on to play Granny on the Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just kind of a weird novelty thing. And now
Did she play an old person or a young person or just a
young person? She was actually a partner with somebody else. It was a comedy team with a guy.
Well, when she was playing Granny, she was playing older than she was, right? Yes. I believe she had she was playing far older than she wasn't young at the time, but she wasn't certainly as old as Granny. So, okay.
Yeah. And now I'm doing these sort of spin-off episodes. So like Mr. Kitzel had his own show at least as like a test. Some of these were just tests. So Rochester and there like these. I feel like there was another one that was like you wouldn't think this person would have their own show. Right. So just
Kenny Baker had his own.
That's
show.
What it was. It was
the
Kenny
Glamour
Baker,
something or Glamour Manor or something. It's like a weird title anyway.
Yeah,
I don't know why they wouldn't just go with the Kenny Baker show and keep it simple and people knew his name, but. Yeah.
So I'm debating whether to do one episode of like Phil Harris or Dennis Day because they have mountains of shows and I'm not going to be doing them all. So I might do just a taste of those ones.
Here's what I would do. You do what you want, but I can throw you over. There's a episode that's not in very wide circulation at all of the Dennis Day show. It's the only episode I know of that Jack is on Dennis's show, and Jack is essentially I think his bit is he's weighing himself on a scale and bumps but he can't know Dennis, so he doesn't know who Dennis is because Dennis on his show as a character isn't the Dennis Day we know from the Jack Benny show. It's a different Dennis Day, which is totally weird to play yourself in 2 different roles where you're using your own name or whatever, and yet they're 2 different characters.
That's weird.
But I don't know who made that crazy decision. At least on Phil's show, he acknowledges that he's on the Jack Benny show, and it makes more sense when Jack appears that they know each other and everything. They don't have to do this strained thing like they do on Dennis.
Well, that makes a lot more sense. I haven't heard that many episodes of A Day in the Life of Dennis Day, and sometimes an actor will come on and be like, "Oh, I guess they couldn't get the same actor to play whoever his mother or whoever."
Right, but he has a different family, a different So it's just weird. And like you say, it ran a long time. And then for Phil Harris and Alice Faye, you grab any episode and you're good to go.
Yeah, that's great.
Golden show. And then we're presenting this year, just because of how it falls. Of course, it's going to be the 54-55 season, which is the final season of the, if I'm airing them exactly from X amount of years ago. It's the very last season of the Jack Benny show, so we're going to be presenting his last season in radio, and that's a fun season to present. There's so many cool things. There's Ed coming up out of the vault. There's a lot of times you can tell it's like the last. They don't really announce that this is the last of anything. But they do weird things that you're always said, oh, it would be neat if they did X, Y, or Z, and then they go ahead and do it that last season. And what's funny is most of it doesn't work very well because, and that's why they never did it. It's a fan thing that in your head you say, oh, they should do this, like bringing Ed out of the vault. But it's like, okay, how far can you go with that, and how do you make it funny, and how it starts to become, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute, it starts to become awkward, and so that awkwardness takes away a little bit sometimes. But
yeah, and also like
yeah.
usually you have to worry about, I can't take Ed out of the vault because then I can't do any more episodes with Ed in the vault, right?
Right,
So
right. But you're like, okay, we're done with the radio
season,
show. We're not doing any more seasons. Yeah, yeah. That's why they could do it. Yeah, and it. I'm glad they did these things. I'm glad they did final episodes of so many things that last season. Even whether they work or don't work 100% is fine. Also, the other thing too is, while they're doing the radio season, their main focus is on the TV show. So of course the writers are cranking things out faster, and it's like, okay, this works kind of well, so let's go with it. Whereas if that was their sole thing of still creating the radio show and there was no television show, they'd pound it out more and more and go, okay, that's not funny enough. Let's figure something else out. But in this case, I mean, I can't imagine they're just keeping up with the television show is hard enough, and then they throw a radio show on top of it, because it's the same.
Well, that last season they did do a lot of reruns as well.
Correct.
And here we are. What year is this episode we're about to talk about? This is also a rerun.
Right. This is 56 or 57. I can't remember quite where we're at. It's one of the two. So
yeah. And this is a rerun from 1945.
Right.
The original Ronald Colman episode. This was the first episode with Ronald Colman.
Right.
And here we are. We're going to be talking about the last episode with Ronald Colman, and it's the same story.
Yeah. Exactly. And the Colemans were such a rich addition to Jack's show. I think we'll just talk about them in general to begin with, but Jack's show, one of the reasons we love it, and we've talked about this before, but this will be a slightly different take on it, is that you could do Jack in the studio stuff. You could do Jack About Town, where they're going to a premiere of a movie or something, and he and Mary are walking down the street having a conversation, right? And so it can be supposedly offset, supposedly onset, all that sort of thing. But the other huge piece was when they added Rochester, they started going into his home more often, so that you could have parties and things, and you could have Phil and all the folks over there, or sometimes just he and Rochester would have a little bit at home, and then it would go back into the studio from there and with the rest of the cast. But it's a piece that always needed maybe a little more fleshing out, and because you only pretty much had Jack and Rochester, and then you'd have Jack and Rochester and someone that's visiting them from the show, Don, Dennis, Mary, whatever. But to have someone outside of that group, which is the Colemans, that they pretty much exclusively, I think they do exclusively bump into outside of the show. It's always like they're going to the house for dinner, or they're going to a concert with them. I can't remember an episode where they're like, oh, the Colemans are here visiting us in studio as our there's never a show like that.
I think there's one episode where Jack invites the Colemans to his house, which is sort of home ground, but it's not the same as like this is
correct. It's not having them in the studio with acting like they're on the radio show. It's always part of his just domestic life of Jack.
It's never special guest star Ronald Colman.
Yeah, right. And now they've had ones where Ronald will know about the radio show because he'll comment on like Dennis's impression of him and things, and Dennis might do an impression of him like at a party or something, and then he'll critique Dennis's impression or whatever. But they just add a richness and another level and another that suspension of disbelief that we have that will follow Jack anywhere and things. They just heighten that, because it's like, okay, so now he has friends or frenemies that he visits or barges in on, and from time to time that make that even more real, that whole situation. So this episode, we're just delighted to have it. Like John says, it's a remake of the very first appearance of the Colemans. I sometimes wish in television that they would do different things and not just remakes of the episodes. But honest to goodness, in this one, if you knew, because no one knew, but this would be the only episode that the Colemans would ever be on of Jack's television show, because Ronald Colman dies 2 years after this. I think he dies, I think, in 58, I want to say, and this is 50. I think this is 56. Might be 57. Anyway, but he's never on again. And you go, well, he had 2 more years. Why couldn't they have had him on? But from what I've read, it sounds like Ronald Colman had something. I'm not sure if it was cancer, whatever it was. It was like a long illness, and so I think he wasn't at his best, and they were probably hoping that he was going to get healthier, and he didn't. He just ended up dying. So this is, like I say, his only appearance. It is a redo of the first appearance they made, which is, it was so good that they created this unique space for the Colemans to live in that no other human beings had ever done, right? So, I mean, I'm sure it was done as a one-off, and they're like, oh, that was too much fun. We have to visit the Colemans again, or have a way to have them on the show again. So they did. But anyway, let's just get to, so those two episodes, this one, the filmed one, on Jack Benny's TV show, and the original that was the radio show. What are your feelings like comparing those and things, John?
Okay, well, first I gotta say the pacing is totally different, because in the radio show they're right in the middle of the I Can't Stand Jack Benny contest, and so they spend a lot of airtime talking about that, and then they sandwich this little segment, the skit or whatever, right in the middle of it, and so they're moving a lot faster, and there's fewer jokes and things like that. So when you watch this episode, the pacing is much slower. I mean, they still have to add the stuff at the beginning with Rochester and Mary and Dawn to stretch it out. But even just the part at the Colemans is much slower, and and because this is an edited episode rather than a live episode, things are done a little differently. I actually think this is one of the best edited episodes of the Jack Benny program. Wow. Sometimes things get lost in the editing. This time I feel like it enhanced it, and I can get into some details, but I would like to hear your thoughts first.
Well, I was going to say the pacing of the show, I don't know. I guess, as I was talking off air with you, it reminds me the most of like The Office, sort of, where they'll let things breathe and feel uncomfortable, knowing that's humorous. And to our audience, I mean, if you like both Jack Benny and The Office type of humor, you're going to love this episode. I mean, it's a great combination kind of the two, because so much of it is awkward humor.
Totally.
I myself am not as comfortable with awkward humor, and it's just me. So don't put anything on this episode with that. It's just, I don't know, for me, the cringy sort of things that happen, I envision myself in that situation doing the cringy thing, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. And so I while it's funny, it's just awkward for me as well. So that's why they don't work as well for me.
Totally.
And like you say, the pacing, certainly the radio show, they didn't let anything breathe because they couldn't. It was compacted, and they only had so much time, and so they're presenting this thing, and so it's like a little bit of a roller coaster ride that's fun, and it's awesome, and I love that episode. This episode of the television show, while it's still great, they're expanding it out, they're letting it breathe more, but they don't add that many more jokes. What they really do is just let the jokes breathe, let the awkwardness build, all of that sort of thing. I do want to yank before I'm trying to grab things that I want to talk about. The Mary thing. Mary's on this episode. It's probably, of all the episodes that I can think of that she's in the Jack Benny show on television, that she's in the least. It's one of those that they could have easily not have her do. I don't know what, I mean, they're probably just at this point so much like, oh, Mary's available. Let's do it. Just write her in. Let's get her in there. So she's in the episode. Both they come in like before the Coleman piece and after, right? There's a before and after sort of thing, and she's on like both of those. She's not in the Coleman piece. I almost wish they would have changed, just went, we got Mary. Let's just change it up a little bit. Let's have Mary go with Jack. Because if Mary went with Jack to the Colemans, when Jack's feeling awkward in things, she could also be, because when she punctures Jack when he's at his worst, it makes it's like the capper every time, and it makes it so funny. And I think I would have enjoyed that more by having Mary there. Having Jack with a character that we don't know, this other Jack, who, because you guys already watched the episode, so I love this because we can spoil anything we want. So there's another Jack there. So Jack thought he was invited to come to the Colemans when the invitation was really supposed to go to this other Jack guy. And so he's there essentially because it establishes that, okay, there's another dude that was supposed to be invited to this thing. Jack's not supposed to be there. Then the Colemans are trying to figure out why Jack is here and kind of invited himself and all of this. Well, you essentially got Jack plus, for television audiences at least, 3 people we're not used to on the show. I mean, this neutral guy, and then you've got the Colemans, who are funny and who are great, but it's their first time on the television show. So it might have been nice to include Mary in that, to just make it where we have more people we know in the situation, I think. I'm not sure.
I could see that. I could see her doing a good job with, like you said, puncturing or having these, she's not afraid to insult Jack.
Yes,
whereas
right.
the Colemans, sort of their point is that they have to sort of pretend to be polite the whole time. So I can totally see that.
Or even her, she does something that's so silly, but it works so well. And I don't think I've ever commented on this in 20 years of doing my podcast, but she does do this. She does where Jack does something stupid and she goes, "Oh, Jack." It's just that like exasperated sort of, not again sort of thing. But it does lend, it just adds, like I say, it's a little topper to Jack's done something awkward that's funny, and then she's like, "Oh, Jack," and then it's, I don't even know, was eye rolling a thing back then? She sort of has a verbal eye roll that she does all the time on the radio show, because of course you don't have eye rolls on radio shows. But it's sort of that, and I don't. And that's sort of how you feel like everybody at this party, except for Jack, would be constantly doing eye rolls and be like, "Oh my gosh, what is he doing?" But I love the episode. I mean, it is great. And back to John.
Yeah, I was going to say, my theory of the Mary thing is she sort of had this self-consciousness or stage fright thing, getting into the 50s. So she wouldn't appear on any live episodes. And I feel like this is early on in that time where they could barely get her on at all. Right. So I think this was sort of a way to say, hey, it's a very controlled environment. You're with Dawn and Jack, and you'll only be on for a couple of scenes, and we're going to edit it to make you look good.
Right.
And so then there's less pressure, and it's just, yay, we get to have Mary on the show, and we get to do something to fill that extra time in.
And you don't know, right? Because they could have, and this could be, okay, let's extrapolate and let's just think for a minute. The writers could have easily had her written, because we just said she's on here less than any show she's ever been on. What if the writers wrote her to be with Jack, with the Colemans, and she said after the fact, "I can't do that. I don't feel comfortable being, just surround me with, I'm comfortable with Jack, I'm comfortable with Dawn, I'm comfortable with the folks on the regular show. I'm not comfortable and Coleman's like a Oscar-winning sort of actor, right? Yeah. And things. And so I could see her be reticent to be in that. And if she did that, that would make sense with how little she's in the episode, and yet she's still in it. Two, it would make sense with how kind of awkward so much of this is, and why they're pausing so much and everything, because they're taking something that was designed to have this other character within it, pulling that character out and be like, okay, well, we're not going to change anything really. We're just pulling out her pieces, and we just let it breathe a little more. It'll be interesting. I'm going to go back and rewatch it now and see, is there any telltale signs of someone saying a line like Mary would say it? Because often in the radio show, when they excised her out, they kept some of her lines in and gave them to, say, Benita, or that new Jack, I can't remember what his last name is, character. They might hand them to them to say some of them, or Coleman himself. But that'll be interesting to see if it looks like that's what they did. Who knows? Also, the other thing is, because we have all the radio scripts, the television scripts, it'd be interesting to go back and look at it and see if there was Mary's part like crossed out or anything. That would be really interesting. But chances are the television scripts, the radio scripts are more like someone is fixing them as they go, right? You're crossing things out. You're saying, oh, they didn't say that line, or they didn't say it quite that way, so they changed it. So it's beautiful reading the radio scripts, because you get to see whole scenes that were excised, or they edited out or whatever for time. Whereas the television scripts, I get to feel like there was a first version and a second version and a third version, and they finally got it right. They're not going to go off of a television script much. They're going to stick to it. So what you get in that final version is usually just a transcript of what actually happened on the television show. I don't think there's a lot crossed out or anything like there in the other scripts. So anyway,
I do want to go back to the awkwardness thing, because I actually liked the awkwardness thing, but I don't know if it's as funny as the original, but I do like it.
Because in the original, there's not that awkward pausing and things, correct?
No, there's not. No, but it reminds me. Like, I watched Curb Your Enthusiasm with my wife, and I thought it was hilarious. And she's like, "I cannot handle this. I hate how awkward it is. Why is he doing that? That's totally socially inappropriate." Like it's just like, I totally get that thing of it being like, oh, it's too much, it's too awkward. But I thought it was interesting, the fact that they went with that in this, because it's not in the original. In the original, Jack Benny is clueless, which in some ways is a lot more funny. But in this one, you can kind of see on his face that he gets it. Like he gets that it's awkward.
Yes.
As opposed to being totally clueless, which is a totally different take. And it's unusual for them to take an original script, adapt it for television or a rerun on radio, and have a totally different take like that. And I think the reason is because of the editing. I think to leave those extra few seconds is something that you can do because you have the time in editing to see,
it works.
Can we expand it? Like, what's the right amount of time to do that for? So I thought it worked really well and was pretty amazing. And I thought it was interesting the ways that they adapted this totally written for radio thing to television and were able to pull it off. Like the fact that at the end on the radio show, he says, "Oh, okay, bye, Jack," door slam. And he says, "I'm not out yet." You would think there's no way you can do that on television. No. But they did it through editing, cutting away and then cutting back in front of Coleman's at the door like this. I thought that was brilliant and great.
I would have thought. There's so many things that when they port something from radio to television that you think, okay, that bit's not going to work. They're just going to have to write something a little different. And yet they figure out a way, just like this, to twist it and so that it will work. They shoehorn it into television, and you're going, okay, that was a push, but it worked. And it's funnier to, it's not meant for us. It's not meant for, okay. If you're a person that loved Jack in the 1940s and listened to this show originally when it was aired in 1944, and then saw the television version, you've got 20 plus years of time 10 plus years of time that have passed. And And you're not going to remember to compare the two in your head or anything.
Yeah.
The only people that can do that are from modern day that go, oh, I can listen to the radio version and then I can watch this version, right?
Mhm.
And so then you can actually compare back and forth and go, oh wow, they kept that bit or they changed this bit or whatever. But it makes it so much enjoyable for us because we go, oh man, they actually kept that and figured out a way to do it. And it gets us excited. So I guess having talked about this as much as we have, I'm going to do something unique with this one. We've played the television episode. You've watched that. You get to hear us talk. We've talked a lot about the radio episode. So what I'm going to do now, once we're done, it's going to flip into the radio episode. So you get to listen to the radio episode on this YouTube broadcast or wherever you're hearing this. And then, speaking of that, for you folks, if you're listening at this point, you're a big fan of ours and a big follower. You haven't fast forwarded or anything. So just so you know, I do put these every week on YouTube, but I also have a podcast that has these same television episodes and the whole thing. I don't change a thing. I put it on there so people can listen to it in their car if they want and not watch it if they don't want to. But that's called the Jack Benny TV show podcast, Videocast. And what it does is everywhere you can listen to podcasts, you can listen to it. But if you go to Spotify, you can actually watch them just like you watch them on YouTube because they actually play videocasts on. And so I load them up as a videocast on Spotify and it goes out everywhere else as an audio thing. So if you'd rather do that, feel free to do that. It's kind of fun to watch them on your phone or whatever, or you're out and about or whatever. But having said all that, so you'll be able to listen to the radio show when we present it, and then after that we'll still do our traditional that we've started doing where we play the trailer for next week's episode, right? And so stick around. Boy, this is going to be a long one, but that's okay. And we got more to talk about anyway. We're not done talking because we're going to switch over to Jimmy Stewart here in a minute. Is there anything else in the actual episode that you want to chat about or bring up?
Well, I just want to mention a couple more things, especially if we'll be playing the radio show, about the difference between the radio and the television show. One is the visual of Jack Benny in the tuxedo.
Yes.
Is great, especially when you first see him at the Colemans, because you see him getting ready and he's got the tuxedo on, and then you see him arrive at the Colemans and the top hat just makes it look hilarious.
Yes.
And it's great. And
and the bit with I love that we do this after the show now because I wouldn't want to say this stuff.
Yeah.
But so please, if somehow you skip the show and watch this, go watch the show and then watch it. But anyway, the part, and it's a long build, and I love when Jack does long builds and payoffs, right? The whole, and it's funny twice, is he gives the butler the hat. Yeah. And then throws the gloves in the hat and makes a big deal that he's throwing the gloves in the hat, which is just a funny, pretentious thing to see Jack doing, so it makes it funny.
Yeah.
But later when he puts the hat on, he has the gloves in the hat still. So now the gloves are laying on his head and he pulls the hat off and he's got the glove laying on his head and he has to take that off. I mean, that's a funny little bit.
Totally. And it's something
that's not, it can't be in the radio show, right?
Yeah.
I haven't listened to it lately, but it must be just a visual in this only, right?
Totally, it is. And it's a miracle of editing too, because you don't notice there's a cut in the editing, but the glove is perfectly landed like that, where if that was random, it would take like a million takes to have it. So
I thought the same
thing.
thing.
Fact that it's just laying like right there is very funny. And even the bit with the shoes, that's also an addition for the television show, where he's, there's the buildup of him being formal and they're informal. And then Ronnie says, oh, we're not going to change, we're informal here. Yeah, we're informal with our jacket and tie. But Jack says, oh, good. And he takes off his shoes. I thought that's also
that was so good. So good. And you're tying it into Curb Your Enthusiasm, probably is a better tie into the awkwardness than The Office even is. I mean, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Seinfeld, The Office, they all have those awkward comedy bits in them. They all recognize awkward is funny.
Yeah.
But none of them do it as over the top as Curb Your Enthusiasm. Curb Your Enthusiasm builds it into every episode, most scenes. I, like your wife, I can barely watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. I have not watched all of it. I want to at some point, but I'll watch an episode or two, and then they'll do something that makes me so uncomfortable that I step away and I won't watch it again for 6 months. And then maybe I'll go try and dip my toe and do another episode. So it's probably going to take me the rest of my life to get through the whatever. I mean, I think they're on the 11th season, and it's over now. But each season was like, some of the seasons were 6 episodes or 7, and they're short. So yeah. But anyway, go ahead.
The last thing I want to mention about the difference between the radio and television is in this television show, which is it's really odd. They mention Frank Remley, who's sort of notorious as this sort of like partying kind of guy. He's the guitar player for the Jack Benny show, and so they've joked about him a long time on the radio show. I mean, it's rare that he would ever appear. I think there's maybe like one time that he actually appears.
Well, and of course, just dovetailing on that real quick, they do have Frank Remley from the Phil Harris and Alice Faye show come over to Jack's show at least once, I think maybe twice. Though the actor, it's so funny in his interviews with who plays him,
Elliot Lewis.
Elliot Lewis, thank you. In the interviews with Elliot Lewis, Elliot says, I was never on the Jack Benny show as Frank Remley. I was on many times as lots of other characters, but I was never on as Frank Remley. And it's like, no, dude, you just totally forgot, because he's definitely positively on there at least one episode. And it's like I say, maybe 2, playing the Frank Remley character. So it's strange. You got Frank Remley. At that point, you would have Frank Remley in the band. You would have a fake Frank Remley on stage acting like he's Frank Remley and doing more dialogue than Frank Remley ever did on the show, because of course the band member, you're not going to give him more than a couple lines at most. And with Elliot Lewis, you can give him as much as you want. He could do Shakespeare as Remley if they wanted him. But anyway, so that it's interesting, that dichotomy always. So anyway, you were saying they hardly ever.
So in the original episode, in the radio show, that joke is not about Frank Remley. It's about Phil Harris.
Oh.
Because, of course, Phil Harris was on the show, and he has a similar sort of reputation, although maybe less so. So I was surprised that if they were to redo it here, they wouldn't just say Phil Harris. I mean, it's still...
you got to remember, though, we got to look at the time frame, right?
Okay.
So at this time, and I wish I knew in the episode, 56 or 57, it doesn't matter, whichever one, it works with both. There could still be feelings between Jack and Phil. We don't know what happened. We just know that in 51, 52-ish time frame, they split, and Phil was no longer on the radio show and wasn't on the television show. And I think it was about him being on the television show was part of it. They wanted him to be on the television show, and he was not going to be. So they parted ways, and they would patch things up, apparently, because he would then actually be on Jack's television show. Plus, within the same time frame, just months apart, I think, he was in the Jack's 40th birthday celebration, which was a big television thing they did, not on Jack's show, but it was like on I don't know if it's the GE thing or whatever, some Tower of the Stars or something like that. And in Milt Josephsberg's book, maybe it's Milt. Anyway, one of the books, it's either Irving Fines or it's Josephsberg's. I get them confused because you read all those books and it starts to get muddled in your head. Yeah. Anyway, the line in there that I always thought was so funny in that book was, he said, Phil Harris was around so much in that time frame of like 58 that it felt like he was a regular on the show. And I'm like, as far as I can tell, he appeared twice in 58. So anyway, I think it was after 58 that they were doing this episode. They probably would have used Phil Harris's name because he's known to exist in the Bennyverse again at that point. they've sort of made things up apparently. And then of course, fast forward to 1971, I think, early 71, he's on a Jack Benny special as the featured player. He's the main guest that he has on that Jack Benny special in 71. And they do the exact same bit he did in 58 on the Jack Benny show, which is a little frustrating, but you get to see it in color. So there you go.
Yeah.
And that the Jack Benny television show had been not lost, not in circulation for many, many, many ever. And so no one had ever seen it. And then this last year, the International Jack Benny Fan Club released it, at least put it out there on YouTube so people could watch it, which is really cool. And we're going to be presenting it. We already recorded an intro for it and everything. We're just waiting for it to come up in our timeline, which is soon. It'll be probably by the end of this year. It'll be where we'll be airing that episode, which will be fun having that episode there. Anyway, that's the whole timeline for you folks that are into understanding the intricate workings of the Jack Benny show and guest stars and the whole thing. Anyway, back to John on.
Well, I was going to say, let's talk about Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart. So what happens with Jimmy Stewart is the Colemans come on. By all indications, they wanted to redo the Colman episodes from radio because they were all funny. They were all really well done with the Colemans on the television show. But we get this one, and then there's nothing. And I think there's nothing for a reason. I think they're waiting for, like I say, Colman to get better as he's getting sicker, and he passes away. After he dies, this is one thing about Jack and his team that you just kind of got to live with. And it's like, it's a little awkward that sometimes you think, oh, maybe they should just let pieces die when characters that are known for doing this pass on. Maybe they should just let the piece die and just have it live in radio. But oftentimes they want to bring it to television, and so they get someone else to do it. Famously, for some reason, I know why. The Marilyn Monroe episode that she's in live in 1953, I want to say. I'm pretty sure it's 53. I think it's the first episode, 53 season, 52, maybe. 52, somewhere in there. Anyway, then she, of course, dies, and on that episode as well is Artie Arbach playing Mr. Kitzel, and he passed away in 58. So what they often want to do is recreate these episodes that were filmed live and film them so they could be put in the syndication package if they want, right? And in this case, they did. It is in the syndication package. So they refilm that episode, but they've lost two of their main people. Well, one of them being the main person, Marilyn Monroe, and they replace her with Jane Mansfield, and they replace Mr. Kitzel for the first and only time ever with Schlepperman. So Sam Hearn plays the Mr. Kitzel. Well, he doesn't play Mr. Kitzel. He plays Schlepperman, but everyone has always realized that they could kind of play things interchangeably because the characters are so similar. And this is the only time they actually truly went with and said, look, we can replace Kitzel with Schlepperman totally, and that's what we're going to do. And they did it. You can be offended by that, or you can just enjoy it for being an awkward, interesting situation, because he'd been playing Schlepperman since 32. So, I mean, what is that? 30 years later, he's playing it yet again. And I think that's the last time he plays Schlepperman, I think. And maybe the only time on all of television. Sam Hearn was on a lot of television episodes, but he was usually the Hey Rube guy.
Right. Or I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Right. So anyway, same concept here. They're going to redo. There's this famous, wonderful, maybe even better than this episode. I'm not sure, but it's where they go to the concert and Jack's in the cheap seats up above, I believe, and the Colemans are down below, and Jack wants to get their attention, so he's like throwing things at them, and as he's throwing things, they're getting bigger and bigger, and they're just they know he's doing it. They know, they're like, Jack Benny's throwing more peanuts at you, and then, well, maybe he's run out of peanuts, and so then he won't throw anything anymore, and then he throws the bag, and the bag hits him, and I mean, that is classic stuff. And so they do that with Jimmy Stewart instead of the Colemans, and it's funny. I love that. It was one of my favorite TV episodes. But having said that, it's different. And John and I were talking about this off air, that Jimmy's take is he's playing Jimmy, and he's the everyman, and he's kind of this and an actor, and so he's just playing himself, and his wife's playing herself. And the way they look at things is they're kind of surprised. He's doing this, and okay, whatever, and they're ignoring him, but it's not as much with Coleman's. It's like condescending. It's like, can you believe this little man is doing this to us, and why is he in our lives, and that sort of thing. With Jimmy Stewart, it's like, wow, he just did this. He did why is he so crazy? What's he doing? And it's just a different take, and it works. It's a surprise take or whatever, or amazed at at the crazy stuff Jack's doing, but it's not such an like, I'm offended because he's doing this. It's more, I'm surprised. It works. It's just different. And I love Jimmy Stewart. He's like my favorite actor ever. So having him in these performances and he does multiple, I think he's on 3 times maybe in the television show. I'm not sure. And they're all ahead of us, of course. They're 59, 60, 61, that kind of time frame is where we get a lot of his things. And it gets a chance for him to do these Coleman things for the TV show that we haven't seen before, other than heard them on the radio show. But you've seen that. Have you seen the Jimmy Stewart one with?
I have, yeah. I think we've talked about it, yeah.
Yeah. So I was just going to ask, did you notice the same sort of thing, John, or what was your take between the Colemans doing their bits and the Stewarts doing their take on the same thing?
I hadn't noticed that, but now that you mention it, I totally see it. Yeah, I think that we were mentioning off air that you thought you could have replaced Ronald Colman with a similar style of actor, like this sort of like proper type English maybe guy.
Yeah, I was saying like Maurice Chevalier, somebody like that, who could have who could have done that whole indignant thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But instead of going with a similar sort of character, I feel like they went with a similar level of celebrity. Yes. So that was kind of what they're going at for those sorts of things. And so I agree that it's different, and I agree that both work in different ways, and it's just like the writers, it's hard to come up with new ideas. And if you've got this great idea right here, it's hard to let go of that. Yeah. So I think they do a good job in being able to adapt it. And it's kind of like when they replaced Phil Harris as the band leader on the radio show with Bob Crosby as the band leader on the radio show, 2 totally different characters trying to fill the same role. You got to adapt it, but they're both funny in their own way. Right. Maybe one is a little funnier than the other.
Well, and to me too, the part where and I don't know if anyone else does this but me, but whatever, where I kind of go, ooh, that's a little cringy that they're taking these parts from people that have died and giving them to other people and things. This one redeems it a little bit more in that they didn't do it. This wasn't in 58 or something when Coleman was still alive but couldn't do the part. They didn't they waited until he was gone. He was dead. They're not going to get him. And they waited till like a year after his death to start doing these. So, I mean, to me, that probably makes it all right. And And the reality is, even like the Marilyn Monroe one, well, I guess Marilyn's a little different in that it's a while since Artie's death. Had been a number of years, but it was really quick after Marilyn's passing. I need to look at that and see, because I want to say it's the same year that she died. Who knows? Maybe she was going to be on it and then died, and they already had the script in it. I don't know what. That'd be an interesting piece to read too, is how that all fell together. But anyway.
Yeah, but I do think that at this time they were very comfortable with recycling bits. Like they would recycle the same bit 5 times.
Right.
You know, on like I remember that the one bit with Claudette Colbert, they redid a bunch of times with a bunch of different people while Claudette Colbert is still alive but not available or whatever, right? Like, and then they were doing the same bit on stage at multiple places. So they're like, this is just a bit that I do. And so
totally get you, John. You're 100% right with that. The other thing is, in radio, they could get bigger actors, because film actors were like, oh, I'll be in radio. I'll be on your Jack show. Yeah, I'll be on Jack's show. In television, there were a lot of actors, especially early on, that were like, I don't do television. It's competing directly against cinema, and I'm afraid cinema is going to go away. And so, boy, I have a big thing with not being on. So that makes sense that a lot of the actors who portrayed somebody on the radio show would have to get different actors to be often television level, somebody who's on a rival, a television show. Yeah. They bring in to do a bit that, well, a good example, I suppose, would be, well, he did it once, but he didn't do the film version. The cowboy, who am I thinking of?
Not John Wayne.
No. The big, tall, lanky guy who hardly talks. Yep.
Oh, yeah. The Cheyenne guy. Is that the guy?
He's not in Cheyenne.
Then I have no idea.
We'll just stumble around trying to figure out who we're talking about. But you guys know out there, and I'm sure in my notes for this episode, you're all gonna be going, it's so yeah, it's the tall, lanky cowboy, huge star that's in well, he was in High Noon. That's the one he's known for, is High Noon. But anyway, so I pegged where he's at, but I can't peg who he is off the top of my head.
Wasn't Jimmy Stewart in High Noon?
No, it wasn't.
He replaced Ronald Colman.
Sure, that's it. But anyway, they have him do it on the live one, but then when they film it, it ends up being the star of Cheyenne, who comes on the Cheyenne television show that's a big hit, who comes and does the same part for the filmed version a number of years later, because a lot of them would have it's so funny. There's different levels, right? So you've got the actors who will not come across the television at all. Then you've got a set of actors who will come across the television as long as it's live. For some reason, if it's filmed, they have an issue with it being filmed and don't want it to be filmed. And that ties into the whole, oh gosh, it's not. Now I'm losing it again. But this is the Gaslight episode. In Gaslight, it was the folks it was a spoof of Gaslight. And the folks from Gaslight weren't going to have a problem if it was live, but if it was filmed, then they had a problem. And then I think they were suing them. So you get this strange episode that was like done in 52 or 53 that has Bob Crosby on it, but they don't put it on television until like 59. So they were like, we fought a battle in court for this. We won. We're showing this. We don't care if it's years later and if we haven't used any of these actors in years and how it looks like it's filmed. I mean, it's done in the early 50s, and we're in 59, 60, whatever it was. We're doing it. So that's a interesting one. That whole thing of who would be in what and why they wouldn't be in it, and this whole stigma between television and film, such an interesting thing in history. But go ahead.
The other thing about replacing actors is, for us, these are classic episodes, right? And like,
Yes.
how could you forget that Ronald Colman concert episode?
Yes.
But that's because these are on our fingertips on demand. We can watch any of them on YouTube. We
Yes.
can listen to any of them on our podcasts or whatever at any time we want. Whereas then, if you happen to be at home and you happen to turn on the TV and you happen to see this one episode, then
Right.
you would see it. So you really just had sort of vague ideas, memories of like, oh, I remember the Ronald Colmans, they were
Yeah.
on an episode and they sort of had this attitude, and that's kind of what you think. The recurring things are the things that you remember. You don't necessarily remember these specific
Correct.
things. And so, if you're not thinking of, oh, you're replacing somebody who I remember in a classic episode, you're not thinking of it like that. You're just thinking of, oh, what's on TV right now.
That is true. That is true. That's one thing that we always need to do is realize we are in a unique place amongst Benny fans of all time. It's a great time to be a Benny fan in that you have access to most everything. Some of the television shows you can't access, though it's also beautiful in the back of our minds to know they all exist. Okay, we haven't lost any of the Jack Benny television shows. They all exist somewhere. It's just they're not in circulation, so we can't get to them. And that's why we get excited when additional ones get in circulation, which is really cool. But it's just we have a unique perspective that the original people that watched and heard these things in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s didn't have. There was no VCR. Nobody taped anything. You'd see a television show once, and unless it was in some kind of syndication package and got because they were syndicating things even in the 60s, some stuff. I know I think Jack's show had some that they would do that, but certainly it became later that they did it more. But people experience things once or twice, and so they might remember that. I could see somebody that loved the Jack Benny radio show might see the concert episode with Jimmy Stewart and go, oh, I think I heard this once. And then probably wouldn't even relate that it's Coleman that's even in it. They probably at that point would go, oh, it must have been Jimmy Stewart because he was on the radio for some. Yeah, and it's just, but it was an episode he was in. So I'm sure all of this gets muddled up. And then for us as John, I know we're going long today, but people, you got a fast forward button. The other thing that stands out to me when we're talking about radio to television, when we're talking about actors doing things, the one that astounds me, and it could be wrong. I mean, I haven't seen all the television episodes, and maybe John knows this is different than I do, but one of my favorite, and oftentimes people will say it's one of their favorite, it's in the top, most people's top 15, top 20 Jack Benny radio shows, is the one with Jimmy Stewart, where they're at the Brown Derby, and I've been here 10 seconds and you've got more on me than I have in me. I mean, no, you've been at my table for 10 seconds. I've been here for a half hour and you've gotten more food on me than I've got in me. It's a great, funny bit. I mean, that's a funny, fantastic episode. But I'm surprised, like that one, you've got Jimmy Stewart appearing and yet you're using him for all the Ronald Colman shows. Why not use him to recreate that show because it was so funny? But again, it's one of those that as I look at it, I go, okay, that would be a hard one to present visually. Would it be as funny? You got to spill things on them, but spilling things on people is usually kind of funny. So in television, so it would probably work. I would have loved to have seen that one redone, but they didn't do it. Correct, John? Have you seen a television show?
I don't remember seeing it, but I also haven't watched every episode.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but I don't think they did, and it just stands out as a surprise because they've redone so many. I mean, you've got, I guess, well, no, I was gonna say what they've redone are the ones that are done every year over and over again. Like you have the Christmas episode that they redid for television a few times. You've got the train episode that they redid a few times. You got those recurring ones that they did. The Easter show, we saw that one that they did for television as well. But on the other hand, you have single episodes like this one. This is a standalone. This is the first Coleman's episode, and they bring it across. They bring across the second Coleman's. pretty much most of the Coleman episodes they bring across, whether it's with the Colemans or the Stewarts doing it. It's just strange. Some of the ones they left on the floor, but that's the other side too. Okay, if I'm a writer, right, on the Jack Benny Show, I might go back and go, what's an episode we can? Oh, the Colemans are always funny, and then you might go back and have the Colemans.
Right.
You go, oh, the train episodes are always funny. Let's bring one of those.
Yeah.
Oh, the Christmas episodes, those are always funny. Would you say, oh yeah, there's that one Jimmy Stewart episode that's so funny? That one might slip by, and you might not realize because you didn't redo it a bunch of times. I mean, they redid it once with a different actor in the radio show, playing the part of Jimmy Stewart's part. I can't remember who it was, but it wasn't nearly as good the second time. So it could be in their minds and that they did it twice, but
or it could be, we tried doing that again. It wasn't as good.
That's true. That's true. That could be. Left a bad taste in their mouth from the second time they did it, or the fact that the Christmas episodes are so memorable because they do it every single year, and so they're like, oh, we got to do that. So I don't know. It would have been interesting to be in the writers' room with them as they're talking about which episodes to bring across and which ones not to, and why. I would love a book that just presented that. If it was just their conversations on what to do and what not to do, and going from radio to television, and just the dialogue that happened in that writers' room from week to week to week. And I wish they would have recorded, if somebody just put on a recorder, I don't care the quality, and just had them discussing it, because they'd have to be they'd sit there and they'd chat about what's coming in the television shows, kind of figuring out where they're going there. They'd have to spend some time talking about the radio show and what they were doing with the radio show that week. My gosh, what an interesting insight that would be. But we don't have that. So what we have is John and I talking about it. And that's what you get. But, I don't know. Anything else you want to throw out there with the Stewarts or anything? Are we good?
No, I think that covers it. I think that's great.
I think it covered a lot. So, but as you can tell, this is an exciting one for me. I like talking about the Colemans. I like talking about Jimmy Stewart. I like the whole thing. It's just interesting how this all happens. And sometimes our intros are shorter and sometimes they're longer. It just depends on what we have to do. So anyway, with that, enjoy now the Coleman's first appearance on radio from 1944. I think that's going to be a fun one for you. And then stick around for our trailer for next week's show. And yeah, thank you, John, for joining me. I love that we have these conversations. How long have we been doing this now, John?
Oh, I don't know. It's been years, at least 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
no,
it started right after COVID started, because I started doing Zoom and then we got on. I want to say since 2020, so it's been about 4 years. We're going to head into our 5th year soon. We'll see. We're going to try and get through all of these if we survive long enough to get through all the episodes.
No, it's great.
And if I don't make it, John, feel free to replace me like they replaced the Colman.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, like I said, I haven't watched every television episode. In fact, I pretty much have only watched them as I've gone through them with you. So it's been great. We started out kind of doing best ofs, and now to be doing it chronologically is really interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. I just once we did enough of the best ofs, it was just like, well, wait a minute. We could do these chronologically, especially it's easy in the early years because there's only like 1 or 2 episodes per season that are existing, and then it gets it's going to get a little crazier here. 50, we're in 56 or 57, 57, 58, 59. All of those years are pretty easy because they only released 15 episodes a season at most, and then of those, there's never a full season available. So maybe we have. A lot of times we're lucky and we have 13 of the 15 or 12 of the 15, which is pretty good. Some years we're not so lucky and maybe we have 3 of the 15. But then when they hit 60 and start doing weekly all year long, like a regular television show, so like 30 plus a year, I think, then it's going to take us longer to get through each year. It might take us a year or 2 years to get through 1 year of Jack's shows. But we'll take it as we keep going and things. And the show changes, of course, when Mary stops appearing. There's going to be changes that happen when it goes to a weekly show format. And really, being as it coincides perfectly with Mary leaving and the show going to a weekly format, something tells me that once Mary seems to get things in her head that sort of are like, okay, I can't take any more of this. I'm done. The straw that breaks the camel's back sort of thing. And with her, I think going, you're going to be on 30 shows a year now. I'm done. I'm out. And I think it helped too that her friend Gracie Allen had retired like a year or two earlier. And so she's like, okay, Gracie's out, I'm out, this is all fine. George is doing his own thing and he's doing okay. Jack, you'll be fine on your own, you don't need me, sort of thing. So I think that's a little bit odd. Look at it. You got a little bit of additional content about Mary that you weren't expecting right at the end.
Could I just talk about
John
Rochester
now is
and Don
going to take
Wilson
us on a
for half an
20-minute diatribe on something else. So go, John, go.
No, I was just asking. Could I just talk about Rochester and Don Wilson for half an hour? Because I could do that. I could do that, but I think we should wrap it up.
Do that. You know I would do that. But I'll tell you what, let's talk about them next week. So that's the other thing to think. We always have another week. We can always do this next time. So anyway, thank you so much, John. I hope you enjoyed just having the two of us. It was fun kind of just having the two of us and going back and forth. It was good. So enjoy. We'll see you folks next time and have a great week. And if you're starting out your school year like I am, have a great, wonderful start to your school year. We start up this Wednesday, so that'll be fun. And see you guys next time.
If it's Tuesday. Hello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. Welcome to another episode of the Jack Benny Show from 65 years ago this week. This is the first appearance of the Colemans on the Jack Benny Show, so it's a very historic episode. The Colemans will be appearing over the next decade quite a few times. They just keep bringing them back because they're so good with Jack. It's just a totally different relationship they have with Jack than the members of his cast. Jack, on his cast, has always been sort of the more elite of his cast. There was no one that was supposedly make more money and that sort of thing than Jack did. The Colemans are a whole nother level of this eliteness that plays off against Jack, that he's always trying to be in their group, in their that part of society, and they just do not feel like he fits in at all to that. So the whole play on Jack fitting in with the upper crust of society and failing miserably at it just adds a whole different level of comedy to the program. I especially like they're referring to Rochester as Winchester throughout the series. The whole thing is just wonderful, and I just hope you really enjoy this episode and the upcoming episodes with more of the Colemans. This is the second week, of course, of the I Can't Stand Jack Benny contest. And for us, I've had a few people now enter in on the Why I Can't Stand Buck Benny contest. But some people are saying that they can't figure out what to write. So if you want to change it to Why I Like Buck Benny podcast, you can do that if you wish, since so many people are saying they can't think of anything negative to say, which is lovely, and that's very nice of folks. But just remember, Jack was hugely popular, and people had a hard time of thinking about negative things to say about him, but it was done in a brilliant job. And we'll be sharing that when the winner is announced, what the winning entry was. So we will see you next time. If you didn't get a chance to on Sunday, listen to my podcast, the Buck Benny podcast, that was just a half hour of me talking. I'd love to get your input on whether that's something you want me to keep doing weekly or not. My email address, of course, is buckbennyotr@gmail.com. That's buckbennyotr@gmail.com, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
The Jack Benny Program.
Quality of product is essential to continuing success. LSMFT, LSMFT, LSMFT.
You said it. Why, sure. Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. So round, so firm, so fully packed, so free and easy on the draw. Yes, Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. So round, so firm, so fully packed, so free and easy on the draw.
For your own real deep-down smoking enjoyment, remember, in a cigarette, it's the tobacco that counts. And Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. Yes, the makers of Lucky Strike consistently select and buy the finer, the lighter, the naturally milder Lucky Strike tobacco. The kind of tobacco that means real deep-down smoking enjoyment for you.
So smoke that smoke of fine tobacco, Lucky Strike. So round, so firm, so fully packed, so free and easy on the draw.
At 49, American.
The Lucky Strike program, starring Jack Benny, with Barry Livingston, Phil Harris, Rochester, Larry Stevens, and yours truly, Don Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, last Sunday, Steve Bradley, Jack Benny's press agent, forced Jack into having a contest. You listeners were asked to write in letters completing this simple sentence, I can't stand Jack Benny because. And believe me, folks, the letters have been pouring in. So let's go out to Jack's house in Beverly Hills, where the whole gang is helping Jack open the mail.
Just look at all those letters. I don't know why I let Steve Bradley force me into this contest. It's only been on a week. I bet I've received over 1 million insults already.
Jack, stop exaggerating. You haven't even received 500,000 insults.
I have too.
Oh, don't be so egotistical.
Never mind, Phil. Just keep sorting those letters. Mary, what are you laughing at?
Here's a letter from a lady right here in Los Angeles.
A letter from... What does she say?
She says, I can't stand Jack Benny because he's got the only house in Beverly Hills without mice. If they can't stand him, how can I?
She just made that up. My house is full of mice. So there, I won't give her a prize, believe me.
Well, Mr. Benny, here's a letter from Senator Claghorn.
Senator Claghorn?
Yeah, he's on Fred Allen's program.
Oh. What does the senator say, Larry?
He says, I can't stand Jack Benny because he's so corny when he sits down to dinner, he butters his ears. His ears, that is.
What?
That's a joke, son.
Now, wait a minute.
You're letting them get past you tonight.
Now, cut that out. I don't care anything about him. About him, that is. Now, let's open
Hey,
some...
Jackson, look, here's a letter from a guy who likes you.
Likes me?
Yeah. Jack, have you been writing in?
No, I haven't, and don't be funny. You know, there are people who like me. Go ahead, Phil. Read that letter.
Okay, now where's the place? Oh, here it is. I think Jack Benny is the most big-hearted man I know.
Big-hearted?
Yeah, see?
Phil, that's pig-headed. I had to tell him yet. Oh, Rochester.
Yes, boss.
Are you reading any of the contest mail?
Yeah, lots of it.
Good.
You know, boss, 2 more letters and I'll be convinced that I'm working for the wrong man.
Now, wait a minute, Rochester. A lot of these letters are very nice.
Of course they are. Listen to this one. I can't stand Jack Benny because he's such a spendthrift.
See? Read that again, Mary.
I can't stand Jack Benny because he's such a spendthrift. Signed, Sandy McGregor.
Oh.
And there's 3 cents due on it.
3 cents due. That guy's tighter than Don Wilson in an armchair. Now, kids, we've been all working pretty...
What?
Hello, Polly.
Hello.
Now, kids, I know we've been working pretty hard, but let's try and...
Oh, boss, don't forget you got a dinner engagement tonight.
Yes, I know.
A dinner engagement? Where are you going, Jack?
Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Colman invited me to dinner tonight. They live right next door, you know.
You invited to the Colemans?
Yes, what's so strange about that? We've been neighbors for about 12 years. Of course, for a while, my success in pictures sort of came between us. You see, Colman wanted the lead in The Horn Blows at Midnight, but they gave it to me. You see, at his age, they didn't want him to stay up that late. What are you giggling about?
I saw the picture, and you should have gone to bed earlier, too.
Oh, I don't know.
Can't stand Jack Benny.
What? Polly, you can't enter the contest. You're a relative. Anyway, Mary, I better hurry. If Ronnie and Benita took the trouble of sending me an invitation, I don't want to keep them waiting.
Hey, Jackson, look, you mean they sent you an invitation and they live right next door?
Well, that's the dignified thing to do.
You know, I think that dignified stuff is put on the way Coleman keeps giving out with that phony English accent.
What are you talking about? Ronald Colman's English accent isn't phony.
It isn't, huh? Well, I happen to know that he was born in London.
Phil, where do you think London is?
It's right near Waxahachie, Texas.
Phil, I know about the London in Texas, but it so happens that now, see? Now there's a London in England.
Oh, Lend-Lease, huh?
Yes, we get it back in 1956. What a guy.
Say, Jack, I'd like to see that invitation you got from the Colemans.
It's right here in my pocket. And I wish Rochester would be a little more careful with the mail. Fortunately, I found it lying out on the back porch.
Let me see it.
Here it is.
Dear Jack, glad to know you are safely back in America. Benita and I would love to have you for cocktails and dinner Sunday evening. We'll expect you around 8. Ronald Colman.
There you are.
But what does he mean, back in America?
My trip overseas last summer, you know.
Oh, yeah. I still can't understand it.
Say, boss, you better start getting dressed. It's 7:15.
All right, Rochester, lay out my clothes.
Okay, do you want your tuxedo or your tweed, twill, garbardine, herringbone, serge, Palm Beach, flannel, plaid, corduroy, worsted?
Well...
Jack, I didn't know you had so many suits.
It's all one suit.
One suit?
Yeah, Taylor was here, left his book of samples, and Mr. Benny hates to see anything go to waste.
Rochester.
Hey, Jackson, if you wear that suit, you'll look like the man who came to dinner and got a lot of it on you.
Don't worry about it. Rochester, the Colemans always dress for dinner, so lay out my tuxedo.
Boss, you better not wear that tuxedo. It's awful tight on you.
Never mind. I'm going to wear it anyway.
Okay, but if you bend over, you're going to have a white Christmas.
Now be careful. Now, go in the other room and lay out my clothes.
Okay, which shirt do you want to wear? The plain one or the one that lights up and spells LSMFT?
The plain white one tonight.
That's good. The battery's down in the other one anyway.
Well, I have to go through just to get dressed for a dinner engagement. Come in. Oh, hello, Don.
Hello, Jack. How's the contest going?
Fine. Come on in, Don. And, say, what's that sticking out behind you?
An armchair. I couldn't get it off this morning.
Oh, then I was right.
Jack, how about the contest? Have you really been getting a lot of mail?
Oh, certainly.
You ought to see some of the letters, Don. People have so many reasons why they can't stand Jack, and we haven't even heard from Mama yet.
Your mother can't be in it.
Say, Jack, a couple of contest letters came to my house, too, and I brought them over.
Good.
Here's one I'd like to read to you. It's from J.P. Wilkinson of Girlsboro, North Carolina.
Now, what's he got to say?
Here it is. I've been smoking Lucky Strikes for 25 years because I live down here where they grow the tobacco. And I've seen Lucky's year after year buy the finer, the lighter, the naturally milder tobacco.
Shona?
As you all know, LSMFT stands for Lucky Strike, means fine tobacco. So round, so firm, so fully packed, so free and easy on the draw. The draw, that is.
Now, we all know that, but what's this letter got to do with the contest?
Oh, I'm coming to that, Jack. It's in the P.S.
Oh.
Here it is. I can't stand Jack Benny because he's made of the sadder, the weaker, the naturally cornier jokes.
Don, that letter's more than 50 words, so it doesn't count. Well, I got to go and get dressed, kids.
Where are you going, Jack?
I'm invited to Ronald Coleman's house for dinner.
You are?
Well, what's so surprising about that? I've been invited to the best homes in Beverly Hills. Only last week I was a guest at Gary Cooper's birthday party.
If you were a guest, why did you have to wait on tables?
I just did that for a gag.
A gag, huh? Then why did the guests put tips under their plates?
They did that for a gag, too.
Then why did you keep the tips?
I can go along with a gag, sister. Now, you kids finish sorting the mail. I got to run upstairs and get dressed. Come on, Rochester.
Who's got eyes that sparkle like a lily sprinkled with dew? Lily Bell. Who's got lips as fresh as autumn rain when summer is through? Lily Bell. Would you like a sunbeam on a rainy day? You can catch a sunbeam when she smiles your way. Who's got all the leaves aflutter so they're ready to fall? Lily Bell. Birdies take one look at her and stop their singing to call. My, you're swell. Oh, and incidentally, there's one more thing to tell. If your eyes are open and you think you're seeing a dream, it's Lily Bell. Birdies take one look at her and stop their singing to call. Oh, and incidentally, there's one more thing to tell. If your eyes are open and you think you're seeing a dream, it's Lily Bell.
These trousers are a little tight. How do I look in my tuxedo, Rochester?
Fine, boss, fine.
I wonder if... Oh, darn it, I dropped my gloves.
Don't bend over. I'll get 'em. I'll get 'em.
Oh, yes, thanks.
Boss, you better get going. It's 8 o'clock.
No, Rochester, I think I'll be 5 minutes late. It'll make a better impression on the Colemans. I'll bet that Ronnie and Benita are more nervous than I am.
Oh, Ronnie! Ronnie, where are you?
Right here in the library, Benita.
Hey, darling, shouldn't you be dressed? You know we're having a guest for dinner.
A guest tonight? Who?
Well, you remember? Jack Wellington from London.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I forgot. Good old Wellington. Then you did mail him the note I wrote.
No, I couldn't find the note anywhere. I think it must have blown out of the window. Well, I phoned him instead. He'll be here in a minute.
Why, splendid, splendid.
Well, aren't you going to dress?
Oh, no, not for Wellington. No, this turtleneck sweater is all right. He likes informality.
Oh, well, then I won't bother either. I said, look, could you come and help me choose the wine for dinner?
Yes, in a moment, dear, as soon as I finish this letter. Now, let me see. I can't stand Jack Benny because...
Darling, you're not entering that silly contest, are you?
Oh, I certainly am.
But, Ronnie, why?
Well, I don't particularly dislike Jack Benny under normal conditions, but for victory bonds, it's not too difficult.
But, darling, he's our next-door neighbor.
Well, I know. Well, think of the advantage that gives us. All the other people just hear him on the radio. But we can look out of our window and get enough reasons to win all the prizes.
I suppose you're right. Well, just this morning I heard Mr. Benny shouting at that valet of his. What's the valet's name again? Oh, you know, it's the same as a city in England.
Liverpool?
No, Manchester.
Oh, yes, Manchester, yes.
Anyway, Mr. Benny was shouting at the top of his voice about his coffee being weak. And Manchester was shouting back something about he'd been telling him for years that you were only supposed to use the coffee grounds once. That's a commotion.
Yes, I've heard some of those sessions, but they're mild when you compare them to the ones with that Phil Harris fellow.
Phil Harris?
Yes, the way he comes up the sidewalk every morning yelling, "Okay, Jackson, don't be a mug. Harris is here, so bring out the jug." What a remarkable fellow. Say, does he have some connection with Jack Benny's program?
Oh, yes, I understand he leads the orchestra.
Oh, he's a musician.
No, he just leads the orchestra.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Coleman?
Yes, Sherwood?
Mr. Jack Wellington has arrived.
Oh, good.
Oh, come on, Ronnie.
Hello,
Jack!
Wellington, old boy.
Hello, Ronnie. Benita. It's so nice of you to have me over for dinner. I came direct from the tennis court. I hope you don't mind my being in just slacks and a slip-over.
No, of course not. We hate formality.
Tell me, Benita, what are all those mail bags doing in front of the house next door?
Oh, that's Jack Benny's house. He's running a contest.
Jack Benny? Isn't that the fellow that's on the wireless?
Yes.
You know, I just can't stand him. He's
Wait, don't say it. Don't waste it. Write it down. Write it down.
What?
Well, that's the contest. Now, we'll tell you about it later.
You Americans do have a peculiar sense of humor.
Well, come on, Ronnie. Get behind the bar and mix us a cocktail.
All right.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Coleman.
Yes, Sherwood?
There's a gentleman at the door to see you, sir. Here's his card.
His card? Huh. Jack Benny, star of stage, screen, and radio. And will sing Oh Promise Me at Weddings. Has own tuxedo. But Jack Benny here? Well, what in the world could he possibly want?
Maybe it's about his lawnmower. Remember you borrowed it?
Yes, but I returned it.
Well, maybe he wants to give you back the deposit you left on it.
Well, Sherwood, look, tell him I'll call later, and we have a guest for dinner.
But, Mr. Coleman, he said that you were expecting him for dinner.
For dinner? Benita, did you invite Jack Benny for dinner?
No. Are you sure you didn't?
Well, I'm positive.
I say, Ronnie, is this the eccentric chap you were telling me about that's having the contest?
Yes. Well, his coming here is obviously a mistake, but we may as well make the best of an awkward situation. Sherwood, show Mr. Benny in, and then set another place for dinner.
Very good, sir. Follow me, Mr. Benny.
Thank you.
May I take your hat, sir?
No, this is the collapsible type. I just fold it up and put it in my pocket.
As you wish, sir.
Well. Hello, Ronnie, Benita.
Hello, Jack. Come in.
Yes, yes. Come in.
We're just about to have a cocktail.
Mr. Benny, this is our friend Jack Wellington.
Pleased to meet you, old chap.
Well, I didn't expect anyone else to be here, but that's just like the Colemans. Always room for one more. Yes, sir.
Ronnie.
Oh, yes.
Yes, sir.
Well, the cocktails are ready. A toast. Benita, your health. Wellington, happy days. Benny, good luck.
Whoops, too hard. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to break the glass.
Oh, and that set was 150 years old.
Well, I'm glad I didn't break any of your new stuff. Well, I'll just sit here and read a magazine while you three go and dress. I'll wait.
Oh, no. Jack, old boy, this is just an informal gathering.
Mr. Wellington, you're from England, aren't you?
Yes, I am, old fellow.
Yeah, tell me, Wellington, how are things over there?
Well, it's very exciting right now. Getting things going again. Especially recently with the new elections and all.
Yes, I'd love to get away to England if my schedule would permit. I'd like to be there in the spring.
Yes, at that time of the year, everything's so beautiful, especially the Thames.
Yes, the jolly old Thames.
I always take them whenever my stomach's upset. They're very good, you know.
Benita, are you sure you didn't invite him?
I'm positive, darling.
Oh, Benita, I remember your suggesting that I reread Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. I found it even more elevating on the second reading.
That's true in so many cases. I've just reread the H.G. Wells' Anatomy of Frustration.
Well, I'm rather a dull scholar. I'm just starting on the outline of history for the first time.
Have any of you noticed the frightful mess little orphan Annie's in? The poor little blighter. Yes, sir. Yup. Why they picked Alabama to play the Roosevelt game? Yes, sir.
Yep.
You said it.
Pardon me, but dinner is served?
Thank you, Sherwood.
Come along, let's go into the dining room.
Okay.
No, Mr. Benny, you're not supposed to take my arm.
Oh.
I say, Benny, old boy, you don't take my arm either.
Well, I fellas ought to take somebody's arm. Well, here we are in the dining room. Chow. Let's sit down. Boy, that was a swell dinner.
Mr. Benny, excuse me, but the way you're teetering from side to side, is that chair uncomfortable?
No, the chair's fine. It's all my fault, silly me. I forgot to take the mothballs out of my pants. Yes, sir, that certainly was a wonderful meal. Yes, sir.
Well, it's getting kind of late.
Oh, my goodness, I didn't realize what time it was.
My, yes, it is getting rather late.
It's only 9:30. Yes, sir. Yup. That time marches on.
Yes, sir.
Yup.
Well, I guess I better be running along. Time for me to go home. Good night, Mr. Wellington. Very happy to have met you.
Good night, old boy, and with my luck, we'll probably meet again.
Yes, thank you. Good night, Benita and Ronnie. I had a lovely time. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome, I'm sure.
Yes, we were happy to have you.
Thank you.
I'll show you to the door, Jack.
Thank you. Well, good night, Ronnie, old boy. I had a swell time. Say, I'm awfully sorry about Wellington.
Wellington? What do you mean?
Oh, I know you're loyal to your friends, but isn't it awful the way a guy like him can throw a damper on a party?
You know, Jack, there's a lot of truth in what you say.
You're telling me, huh? Well, goodbye. I'm not out yet.
Pardon me.
Well, good night, Ronnie.
Good night.
Yada-dee-da-dum, da-dee-da-dum, da-dum. Gee, they're nice people, the Colman. Da-da-da-da-dum, da-dum. That Wellington seems to be a nice chap, too. Can't understand him just dropping in uninvited. Oh, well. Yada-dee-da-dum, da-dee-da-dum. Oh, darn it, I dropped my gloves. Can it be the breeze that fills the trees with ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Colman for appearing on my program, and I would also like...
Oh, just a minute, Jack. I've got to read this announcement about the contest.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Ladies and gentlemen, the contest is still on. Prizes totaling $10,000 in victory bonds will be awarded for the letters containing the best stated and most convincing reasons. Just complete this simple sentence, I can't stand Jack Benny because, in 50 words or less, and mail your letter to the Jack Benny Contest, Hollywood 28, California. Added to our board of judges will be Goodman Ace of Easy Aces and Peter Lorre.
Him I can't stand.
And the supreme and final judge will be the Honorable Fred Allen.
Him I can't stand either.
The contest will end at midnight, December 24th. The decision of the judges will be final, and all letters become the property of Jack Benny, including the rights to publish. This contest is open to everybody except the employees of the American Tobacco Company, its agents, and the National Broadcasting Company. It is also subject to all federal and state laws and regulations. Jack will be back in a minute, but first, here is someone else who can't stand him, my good friend, L.A. Speed Riggs.
It takes fine tobacco to make a fine cigarette. And Lucky Strike means fine tobacco.
Yes, sir. LSMFT.
Independent tobacco experts, auctioneers, buyers, and warehousemen really know tobacco. And at the tobacco auctions they attend, they can see the makers of Lucky Strike consistently select and buy the finer, the lighter, the naturally milder Lucky Strike tobacco.
That's right. LSMFT.
This fine Lucky Strike tobacco means real deep down smoking enjoyment for you. So smoke that smoke of fine tobacco, Lucky Strike.
The famous tobacco auctioneers heard on tonight's program are Mr. L.A. Speed Riggs of Goldsboro, North Carolina. Mr. F.E. Boone of Lexington, Kentucky.
At 49 out of 49, American.
Basil Rysdale speaking for the makers of Lucky Strike. LSMFT. LSMFT. LSMFT.
Many things may change with the years, but here's one thing you can depend on always. Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. Yes, first, last, and always, Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. So round, so firm, so fully packed, so free and easy on the draw.
Ladies and gentlemen, during this week, the USO Cam Shows will celebrate its 4th anniversary. I'm sure all of us know that what USO Cam Shows meant to our men and women overseas. Just the other day, I was glad to learn that there are more units overseas now than ever before, and they'll continue sending their shows as long as our men are over there. I was privileged to wear the USO Cam Shows uniform for 3 overseas trips, and I know all the people in the entertainment field, as well as those who are not, congratulate USO Cam Shows on its 4th anniversary. Thank you and good night, everybody.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Wow. now for something very special. Kathy, what do we have now?
We've got a trailer for our upcoming episode.
Wow. John, do you like trailers?
Ooh, do I?
All right, let's see it.
Really be.
Mr. Benny?
Yes?
You want it on the phone.
Well, look, I'm right in the middle of the show. Will you get the number and I'll call him back right away?
The other party, they said it was very important.
Excuse me. Just a minute, will you please? Right in the middle of the show. Hello?
Hello, boss. This is Rochester.
Rochester, you of all people should know enough not to call me in the middle of a show.
But, boss, I've got news for you.
Well, what is it?
Brace yourself.
All right, I'm braced. What is it?
Your car's been stolen.
My Maxwell? Stolen? I mean, when did this happen?
2 hours ago.
Well, why didn't you call me sooner?
I just stopped laughing.
But, Rochester, I'm in no mood for nonsense. Now, was my car stolen or not?
Yes, boss, it's gone.
How do you like that? Yesterday, I put in 5 gallons of gas.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, there's nothing to worry about, Rochester. I'll get hold of the Beverly Hills police. You know, they're always on their toes.
They could be on their knees and catch that car.
Now, never mind. Rochester, look. Get on the phone immediately and call the Beverly Hills police station.
Well, I tried to, but I couldn't get them.
What are you talking? You couldn't get the Beverly Hills Police Department?
They've got an unlisted number.
Oh, yes, they're so classy. Well, it's the classiest police department I've ever... Rochester, look, I'm going over there right away, and you get there as soon as you can, will you?
Okay.
Fine, okay.
Bye.
Oh, Don! Don Wilson! Don!
Yes, Jack, yeah? Oh, Jack, what was all the excitement on the telephone?
Look, my Maxwell has been stolen. I've got to go right over to the Beverly Hills police station.
You're leaving now, right in the middle of your show?
Well, I can't help it, Don. Now, you can take over. Bring out the Sportsman Quartet.
Oh, but Jack, the sportsmen aren't due on until later in the program.
I can't help it, Don. This is an emergency.
But they're not ready yet.
I don't care whether they're ready or not.
Well,
now bring them on.
Don't yell at me. It's not my fault you put in 5 gallons of gas yesterday.
No, but it was your big fat idea that I use Ethel. Now bring them on.
Okay. Sportsman, ready or not, you're on. Hey, sportsman. Hey, sportsman, fellas. Fellas, hurry up, you're on. For heaven's sake.
I'm putting on the top hat, tying up my white tie, brushing off my tails. I'm duding up my shirt front, putting in the shirt studs, polishing my nails. I'm stepping out, my dear, to breathe an atmosphere that simply reeks with class.
And I trust that you'll forgive my dust when I step on the gas.
For I'll be there, putting on the top hat, mussing up my white tie, dancing in my tail. This coat isn't mine. This tie just won't do. I'm feeling a drag.
Who has my left shoe?
I'm lighting up a lucky, puffing on a lucky, blowing out the match. Oh boy, I'm glad, happy with the lucky, better taste the lucky. There's a reason to match. A lucky strike is made of only the finest, lightest, and mild tobacco. You'll get real enjoyment from Lucky's. There's not a thing they lack. It's light up time. Time to light a Lucky. Time to puff a Lucky. Has anyone a match? Has anyone a match? Hasn't anyone a match? It's light up time.
Jack Benny's next television show will be in 2 weeks. Remember, 1 week from tonight on this same station, be sure and watch Ann Southern in Private Secretary.